Bichiamo, greetings. Just give me a couple of seconds. I'm still setting up and sending out a couple of messages. And I'm going to post the document that we're going to be speaking on today. Okay, let me know if you can see that document posted. All right. Okay, can somebody in the chat room first let me know if you can hear me well, and then also let me know if you can see the document we just put up. Okay, we're just sending out a couple of messages, and just give me a couple more minutes, and we'll get started. But just send me a message. You got to log in to send a message, but send me a message and let me know you can hear me, and we'll get started. Give me a second. Okay, and we just gotta send a message out to our people on Facebook just to let people know. Okay, computer's moving a little slow. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, Michiamo, can somebody just send a message real quick? Let me know you can hear me. Okay, Michiamo, greetings. Medinde, Odwirafo, Kwesi, Ra, Nehem, Ptah, Akhan, AKANFO, NANASOM, Da. That means my name is Odwirafo, Kwesi, Ra, Nehem, Ptah, Akhan. I am the Odwirafo of the Akwamu Mine Amanukai Tifi Mu, which means the Akwamu Nation in North America. AKANFO NANASOM is ancient, authentic, Akan ancestral religion. So we've been doing these sessions for a number of weeks. We took a couple of weeks off. We had Apo observance, Apo Afashe, which is in Akan. That's Apo is a celebration where it's basically a cleansing, recalibration, spiritual recalibration. That was a 13-day observance. We went from March 12th through March 24th. So we decided to take the two Bennadas or Tuesdays off during that celebration observance, and now we're back. Hold on one second. Okay, so you can hear me, cool. All right, so AKANFO NANASOM again is ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion. We started off our series, our broadcast, with the 3-part series on NANASOM Ne Amamre, which means ancestral religion and ancestral culture. So at first we talked about the Akra, the Akrawa, which is the soul divine consciousness. We talked about the cosmology and how the Akra, the soul, fits into that. Then the second piece, we talked about the NANASOM, which are the honorable ancestresses and ancestors, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors of our people, and their role in our spiritual development, their role in our lives. And then we talked about, in the third session, the nature and the function of the Abosom, which are the divinities, the gods and goddesses, the forces of nature who operate through the sun, moon, stars, earth mother, oceans, rivers, fire, all the various aspects of creation. So we went through that series as a foundation. Then we went through the 11-part series on the Akradin Bosom. So we had a broadcast dedicated to each one of these Abosom. So we started off with Awusi, who was Alsar in ancient Kemet. Then we went to Adjua, who was Alset in ancient Kemet. Then we went to Abena, who is Sekhmet in ancient Kemet. We went to Benna, who is Heru Behudet in ancient Kemet. We went to Awuku, who is Set in ancient Kemet. We went to Akua, who is Nebuchadnezzar in ancient Kemet. Then we went to Yao, who is called Heru. We went to Ya, who is called Wachet. Then we went to Abba, who is called Nekabet. Then we went to Afi, or Afua, who is also called Het-Heru in ancient Kemet. And then we went to Amenet-Amen, who is also called Amenet-Amen in ancient Kemet, or Amenet-Amen in ancient Kemet. So we went through all of the Kradin Bosom, the Abosom who govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies of the Akan week, and they also govern our Kra, and that's what they're called, the Kradin Bosom. And these are the same major Abosom who are in all the different Afurakani, Afro-Ikani cultures. For example, Awusi is called Obatala or Osala in the Yoruba tradition. Afi is called Oshun. Yao, Ya, and Abba are called Shango, and Oya and Oba, the first wife of Shango. Awuku and Akua are called Eshu and Agberu, the wife of Eshu. So we went through all those different divinities. Then the next piece we did was Asase Afua and Asase Ya, and those are the two Earth Mother Abosom. There are two Earth Mother Abosom in Akan culture, Asase Afua, Asase Ya. We showed how these are the same divinities from ancient Kemet, who are Asaset Nebet-Pet and Asaset Nebet-Hetepet, often seen as two wives of Atem. So Atem and the two Asaset divinities, female divinities. And we showed, of course, that Atem is called Odomankoma in Akan culture. We also touched on the fact that Tredriampong is, in Akan culture, is called Kepra in ancient Kemet. So we went through those different divinities, and that kind of laid the foundation. We took a couple of weeks off. Now we're going to deal with some of the Creator and Creatress divinities, that whole complex of Creator and Creatress divinities. Now, before we go forward, are there any questions from the previous sessions that anybody had? Any questions on that? Just want to check the chat for a second. Let me send one more message out real quick. But if you have any questions, just post them in the chat. Hold on one second. Okay. All right, something's up with the, hold on one second, something's up with the viewing screen. Okay. All right, so that's better. So, we posted the document. Today we're going to be focused on Ra and Rait. In Akan culture, they are called Nyankopon and Nyankonton. Now, and as we're going through, you can download that document It says Nyankopon and Nyankonton, Ra and Rait, and this is the basis of the information we'll talk about tonight. And then any questions that you have, you can just pose the questions. But the reason why we needed to deal with this information, first of all, because we just need to know who the creative divinities are, how they function in our lives, and so forth. But also because there's a great deal of misinformation out regarding Afro-Rait ancestral religion and culture in general, and specifically when it comes to AKANFO, NANASOM, Akan ancestral religion. There's a great deal of misinformation for a number of reasons. Some of our people who are scholars, Ghanaian scholars, academics, as well as people here who have been infected with the idiocy of monotheism, because monotheism is pure foolishness. It's the product of the inferior mind of the Caucasian. They sought to create a fictional one God, say that none of the other divinities existed, and then make themselves the representatives of this fictional one God that they created, so that we can worship them as agents of the fictional one God. They don't want us to attune to the actual Abosom, the actual forces in nature that are connected to us, because when we listen to the forces of nature, the Abosom, and listen to our own Nsamanfo, then of course we won't listen to our enemies, we won't listen to them, we will only seek to eradicate the whites and their offspring instead of trying to listen to them, follow along with them, be obedient to them, allow them to rule, and so forth. So they had to create this monotheistic idiocy to control the minds of people. Now, it's taken over 1,000 years to get, be quote unquote effective for some of our people. And it has happened. People have become infected with this false doctrine. So when they're talking about ancient ancestral, Afro-Rait ancestral religion, whether it's the Yoruba tradition, Akhan, ancient Kemet, and so forth, they very often try to force this monotheistic idea or ideal onto the traditional culture, traditional religion, and it's totally inaccurate. For them, it's an agenda. They know it's not true, but they're still trying to control the minds of our people. Then we have our people who, get involved, and then they repeat the foolishness of the whites and their offspring. So they try to force monotheism onto our culture, to our own culture. They try to look for instances in our culture that suggest in their minds that it's monotheistic, and they attempt to exploit that and put it forward. What we have to do, when you look in the culture, just even a cursory understanding of any Afro-Rait culture, you'll understand right away that that's pure foolishness. There's always been, in reality, a great God and a great goddess. That's just reality. In ancient Kemet, you can't force monotheism into ancient Kemet. Akhenaten was not a monotheist. That's pure foolishness. He recognized Hapi, he recognized Ra, he recognized Shu, various divinities. When you look in ancient Kemet, you will always find from the beginning, Amen is the great God, Amenet is the great goddess, the great father and the great mother. In Akan, Amen is called Nyame, and Amenet or Amenat is Nyamenat or Nyamewaa or Nyameba. So that's the great mother and great father. You'll find that Nyame, for example, in Akan is called Nzambe amongst the Bakongo. Across the continent you'll find Nyame, Nyambe, Njambe, Nzambe, just various variations of the same title for the Supreme Being, male and female versions. So when we look at in our Akan culture and you Google information, get books about the culture, get books about the ancestral religion, you start to see a number of different names. You see Nyame, and they'll say that's God. They never mention Nyamewaa. You'll find that in dictionaries and in the names of people, and sometimes they'll say Nyamewaa just means goddess, as it in a lesser divinity, but in reality, Nyamewaa is the great mother, Amenet. So you'll see that, but then you'll see Nyankopong, you'll see Obuadie, you'll see Odomankoma, you'll see a number of different names of actual Abosom, Tredriampong, actual divinities. They will attempt to say that all these names are simply different titles of Nyame, different titles of the one God, as they would like to say. And that's totally inaccurate. So what we do with these articles dealing with these creative powers, these creative divinities, is we show specifically, we go point by point, linguistically, culturally, cosmologically, to show that these are actual divinities, and we make comparisons as well to other Afro-Kaini cultures to demonstrate that point and prove it in the Medutu, the hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet, as well as the cosmology in the language of Akan and ancient Kemet to make the case. So now before we go forward, anybody have any questions so far, or questions about any previous information regarding that? And as we're talking about it, you can look and see, you can post questions while we're talking if something comes to mind, and then we'll check the chat and see what's going on. So, Nyankopon and Nyankonton. Often you'll read that Nyankopon is the creator. They don't mention Nyankonton at all, except to say Nyankonton means rainbow or God's eyebrow. And that's all they'll say. Okay, so let's deal with Nyankopon. Nyankopon is actually Ra, and Nyankonton is actually Rait. Now, first we have to deal with who Ra and Rait are and their provenance. So we're going to talk a little bit like we did at the very first session about the cosmology, the origin of the world. So we talked about Amen and Amenet being the great being, the great father and the great mother. They are complementary opposites. They are two halves of the great divine whole, which is the supreme being. There's never been a time when Amen and Amenet, or Nyame and Nyamewaa, did not exist. They have always existed. They are two individual entities who function as one unit with regard to creation. So again, we use the analogy of if you have an Afro-Kaini man and an Afro-Kaini woman, okay, you are two halves of a whole. Now you are a being, and the Afro-Kaini woman is a being, the Afro-Kaini man is a being. That's akin to Amen and Amenet. Inside your being, you have the capacity to generate thoughts, ideas, you have consciousness, you have intelligence. That's the Ka with a male, Kayet with a female. Then you have the capacity to expand and contract. That's the He in the male, Hehet or Hehut in the female. And then you have a primordial energy, which is Nu in the male and Nut in the female. And when you unite, that primordial energy is activated and it becomes Ra and Rait. Ra in the male, Rait in the female. So let's go back and see how all of that looks. Before anything was created, of course, there are no things in existence. There are only the great being Amen and Amenet. When they decide to create, they unite and decide to create the universe, just like you can be asleep at night in the dark, no lights on, no sound, but you can have dreams. You can have forms or luminous images in your mind, geometric shapes, colors, and so forth. Your capacity to generate thoughts, ideas, images from nothingness is derived from the capacity of Amen and Amenet, or Nyamewaa-Nyame, to generate thoughts, ideas, images, blueprints out of no thingness. The manner in which they did that was they gave birth in the beginning to their soul, their Ka and Kayet. Ka means soul, Kayet is the feminine, or Kat, meaning soul. That's your divine consciousness, your capacity to formulate thoughts, ideas, images, blueprints, and so forth. So first, Amen and Amenet, in order to create the universe, gave birth to two Abosom, two divinities, Ka and Kayet. And they manifest as the black substance of space, which is all pervasive. In European languages and in European culture today, the black substance of space, initially they would just say it's nothingness, it's just a great black void. We've always said that these are it's a manifestation of two divinities, Ka and Kayet, sometimes Kaka and Kaket, or Keku and Kekut, but it's really Ka and Kayet, and Kaka and Kakayet. These are two divinities operating through a substance, a black substance. So years later, the whites and offspring began to say that, okay, that void is not really a void, it's actually a substance. It's called dark energy and dark matter. It's a plasma, and it represents over 99+% of the entire universe. And the planets, moons, suns, stars, all throughout the universe exist within this plasma, this black plasma, this black substance, this dark energy, dark matter. So we've always understood that. They learned that actually directly from our texts in ancient Kemet, and then they began to try to act as though that they came up with these ideas as though it was brilliant. So Ka and Kayet are the great black substance of space. It's an entity, male and female, twin divinity that represents the capacity and is a functionally the capacity to generate anything, generate thoughts, ideas, shapes, forms, images, blueprints, and so forth. So first, Amen and Amenet give birth to their consciousness, two divinities, and those two divinities, Ka and Kayet, create. They fashion and shape. Just like you can decide that you're going to generate an idea in your mind. You can employ your consciousness, you can employ your Ka to generate a new idea, to generate an image. It's not just constantly generating images. You can make a decision. Right now, I'm going to sit down, close my eyes, and I'm going to generate an image. You employ your Ka, you direct your Ka, male, or you direct your Kayet to generate images. That's because the Ka is the soul, and you exercise control over that entity. The reason you can do that is because Amen and Amenet, from the beginning, created the Ka, the great Ka, and the great Kayet, these two divinities, and directed these male and female Abosom to create. The next process was in creation is creating the blueprint through Ka and Kayet. But then, in order for something to come into being, it has to have life. It has to have energy. It has the capacity have the capacity to grow and develop. So Amen and Amenet gave birth to two twin divinities, Hehu and Hehu, the capacity to expand and contract. Expand and contract. Just like you have a breathing process where you expand and contract, and that's the palpitation of life within you. Hehu and Hehut are the two divinities, and we have pictures of them in the article, the two divinities that represent boundlessness, eternity, but also breath, expansion and contraction. So that black substance, the Ka and Kayet that generates the images, now those images are given expansion and contraction, or given life, given breath. Now the next process is energy, because you need to have energy in order to not only have these things living, but growing and developing. So Amen and Amenet give birth to two more twin divinities, Nu and Nut, sometimes called Nun and Nunet, or Nun and Nanet. And their Medutu have a wavy line for the N, and that's a vibratory frequency. And that's the vibratory energy within your body that's always humming. It's the foundational primordial energy that has the capacity to develop into any kind of frequency imaginable. But they're the foundational frequency of energy. Nu and Nut, or Nun and Nunet. So when Nun and Nunet eventually come together, they activate that energy, that wavy energy turns into spiraling energy, and Nun and Nunet give birth to the spiraling fire and heat of Ra and Rait. That's the birth of light. It's the first light that pierces the darkness, and that's the beginning of the creative process, taking that image, form, blueprint that was created in the consciousness, the soul of Amen, Amenet, and begin to make that a physical reality. So the light pierces the darkness, the fire and heat began to shape the dark matter into different spheres, and then those black spheres are penetrated by Ra and Rait, and there's a separation between the denser elements and the lighter elements, and one of those black spheres was the planet Asase-Afur, or Earth, and that black sphere was penetrated by the light, fire, and heat of Ra and Rait, and the expansion and contraction of Ra and Rait, and it developed into a planet. The same thing with the suns and the stars and so forth. Stars are called in European sciences black bodies. They start off as black bodies. That goes right back to our cosmology when we talk about the spheres formed of black substance. Then Ra and Rait move through those spheres and activate them. Now we always draw the analogy of the creative process dealing with water. If you look at put water in a pot, of course, as we said before, and you put heat to the water. First, the water is formless, just like the great Ka and Ka'et. The being inside the water, or in fact, if you close your eyes and look at the expanse of darkness, you're a being dwelling within darkness. Your being is not perceptible. Amen and Amenet, one of the definitions of Amen is hidden or concealed. It also means stable, permanent, and abiding. So Amen and Amenet are the hidden being that's stable, permanent, and abiding. There's nothing that goes beyond Amen and Amenet because they're stable, permanent, and abiding, but they're hidden. Your being, or your consciousness or your being is hidden. It's like if you close your eyes, you can't see your being, you can't see your spirit, but it is hidden. So the same thing with the water. There's a being, there's an energy there. You can see the water, but you don't see the energy. It's hidden. The water is like the formlessness of consciousness. Then when you begin the expansion and contraction, the Hehu and Hehut, and of course notice that Hehu sounds like Hehu, which is breath. These two divinities of expansion and contraction. When you add heat to the water, first there's an expansion and contraction. The water begins to wave. That's Nu and Nut. And once it continues to wave very rapidly, then there's a birth from that wavy energy to spherical forms, which are bubbles, and then the bubbles rise up. And that's the same process where first you have formlessness with a hidden being. There's an expansion and contraction. The formlessness of the consciousness begins to develop. There's a rapid waving energy, the birth of Nu and Nut. That energy connects and produces spheres of heat and fire, and that's the birth of Ra and Rait. So now, that's just dealing with the cosmology, and we go into detail about that in the article. We just wanted to quickly summarize that. That same cosmology, of course, is in Akan culture. So these divinities exist within Akan culture. So what we want to show is Nyankopon and Nyankonton and how they fit into that process. We have to look at the etymology of the terms and the cosmology that support it so we can properly understand it. So often what you'll see is people talking about different versions of the name Nyanko and a suffix. So you have Nyankon Su, which means Nsu means water in Akan culture. So Nyankon Su, they'll say is God's water or the rain. Nyankon Tone means arch. Ntone means arch. So Nyankon Tone they'll say means God's arch. So they're talking about the rainbow. Or Nduru, Eduru, or Nduru means medicine. So Nyankon Nduru means God's medicine. So they'll go through these different, different terms to show that Nyankon is the root. Now, Nyankopong, pong means a couple of things. Opong means great, but pong, as in pono, also means a circle or circular. Now, the etymology that most people who are writing about this often use is Nyam, which means light or shining, Nko, which means single or alone, and Pong, which means great. So they'll say Nyankopong means Nyam, Ko, Pong, meaning the shining one who alone is great. So that goes back to shining, which is like the sun. However, they want to say alone because they're trying to force the idea of monotheism. And then they say Pong is great. So they're still trying to force this monotheistic notion. In reality, Nyanko is the first part, and Pong is the second part. Pong means great, Pono means circle. When you look at the iconography of ancient Kemet, as well as cultures across Africa, you will see that Ra and Rait are not just represented by the Aten, the sun, because they operate through the sun. They created the sun, and they operate through the sun. Ra and Rait are not the sun god and sun goddess. Aten is the sun god. Atenit is the sun goddess. Ra and Rait operate through them, penetrate the sun and all the other stars, and they're the energy that gives birth to the expansion and contraction and fire of these stars, these celestial bodies. But you often see them represented by the circle with the dot in the middle as the sun, because when you see the sun, that's a major transmitter, physical transmitter of Ra and Rait's creative energy, living energy, divine living energy. So you'll see the circle with the dot in the middle. Very often you'll see a serpent, a cobra, surrounding the circle, and the cobra is in the form of a circle. Sometimes very often in the cultures you'll see the serpent not just in a circle, but it's swallowing its own tail. So whether it's swallowing its own tail in a circle, or it's just in the form of a circle, and then with the sun in the middle, that's very often you see that iconography and in the Medutu in ancient Kemet for Ra and Rait. Now, in Nyankopong, Pong meaning not only great, but meaning circle. One of the terms for a particular kind of serpent in Akan culture is Nanka. It's actually the puff adder in Ghana. That's a particular kind of snake. In Nyankopong is really Nyankopong, which means Pong, the great and circular Nanka, serpent. Just like in ancient Kemet, the serpent around the circle of the sun. In the Yoruba tradition, you have the serpent swallowing its tail, representing the rainbow Oshumare, and actually Odumare as well. In the Fon Vodun tradition, Eve Vodun, the rainbow serpent, Da and Idohuedo, are the creator and creatress of the world. They're the rainbow serpent, the serpent with the tail in its mouth, the circular serpent, the creator and creatress of the world. So across the board, you have the circular serpent, sometimes swallowing its tail, operating through the sun, the rainbow serpent, the creator and creatress of the world, and they always say in all the various cultures, the divinity represents the collective ancestry of all Afro-Akaini people. Okay, any questions so far on that? Okay, so let's look at the term Nanka and why that's connected to Nyanka. Now, for example, in Akan culture, when you have twins, there are certain names. It's the same thing across the board in different cultures. If you have twins, you give them a certain name. There's Ata, which is the male and female twins. Sometimes they're called Panyin and Kakra, which is the older twin and the younger twin. Then when you have a third child after the twins, the title of that child is Tewia, and then the fourth child after twins is Nyanko Mago. So they're place names, birthplace names, because everyone represents a certain kind of energy. When the twins are born, they bring in a balance of expansion and contraction, a certain kind of energy into the world. There's certain divinities that govern the twins. The divinity Abam in Akan is the divinity that governs twins. In the Yoruba tradition, that's the Ibeji, which is the Orisha that governs twins. And Eve Vodun is Hohon, which is the Vodou that governs twins. So they bring that energy into the world. So when you have a child that's born after the twins, then they have a certain kind of energy that cools down that expansive and contractive force that was brought into the world. So that child is called Tewia. And then in Akan culture, when you have twins, typically in certain groups you have 3 more children, and that balances out the set. There's a cosmological reason for that. The second child after the twins is called Nyankopong. But sometimes some people pronounce it Nyanka-Mago. So it goes from Nyanko to Nyanka. It's very similar with Nanka becoming Nanko. But let's deal with Nanka, because often they'll say Nyanka is the root, or Nyanko, Nyankopon, and they have to derive their etymology from that, and this is where they get tripped up. But we can show that the deity, the creative power, creator and creatress, from ancient Kemet and Akan, Yoruba, Ewe, and other cultures, is always connected to the sun, connected to the rainbow, a circular serpent often swallowing its tail, and representing the collective ancestry of all Afurakani, Afurakaini people. Nyankopon and Nyankonton, meaning rainbow, circular, pon, serpent, Nanka, collective ancestry of all Afurakani, Afurakaini people. They get tripped up with the Nyanko because the Nyan part is nasal. Now let's look at some terms in Akan that shows the connection between the nasal N and then the NY. So for example, you have the term Nyanka, which means to go, ka for Nyan for fuel. That term is also written Ajanka, which means to go for fuel. So it can be Nyanka or Njanka. There's another term, Ejanka, which means an orphan. So Ejanka means an orphan. But that same term in Akan is also written Enanka, which means an orphan. So some people pronounce it Ejanka, some people pronounce it Enyanka or Enanka, because the first N is nasal. So the nasal N, just like the N in the word senior, it's not senor, it's senior. It's an N, but it's nasal. So Enyanka sounds like Enjanka. So it's just like in English when you have the Y, sometimes people pronounce it as a J. So you hear some people say yeah, that's a nasal thing. You have other people say J. Like in our community they say J, Jero. That's how we say that. But that doesn't come from just us mispronouncing something. In Spanish people say yes, but then some people speaking English would say jes with a J. They interchange the J and the Y. To go back further, some people pronounce the name of the great father Nyame. Some cultures say Nyambe, but then you have others who say Njambe. So it goes from Nyambe, Njambe, Njambe. Some people just say Jambe, and so forth. So you have Ejanka, which means orphan, but then you also have Enyanka or Enanka, which means orphan. So the Nya and the N is nasal. Just like you can have Enanka is also Ejanka, meaning orphan. We have Onanka, which means that serpent, that puff adder, that particular kind of serpent. That's why Onanka is also Onyanka, which is the puff adder, the serpent. And Onyanka Pong is the great serpent, but Pong also means circular, so it's the great circular serpent. Nyankopon, Tone means arch. They associate it with the eyebrow because the eyebrow is an arch. But Tone means arch. And Tone also has to do with the matrilineal or matricircular clan. That's one of the titles of the matrilineal clan in Akan culture. It's Ntong. It's also called Abusia, spelled Abusua. So all Akan people are descended from one of 7 matrilineal or matricircular clans. there's Asona clan, Agona clan, or Asona Abusia, Agona Abusia, Adriana Abusia, Ekowana Abusia, Asinie Abusia, Brietuo Abusia, Oyoko Abusia. Then there are also subdivisions of these various groups like Abrade and Asachiri and a number of different ones. But if you're not descended from the great ancestress, one of those 7 great ancestresses that are the heads of these matrilineal Abusia or Umusia or clans, then you're not Akan. Another term for Abusia or matrilineal clan, mother's lineage, is Nton, which means arch. So Nyankopong, they say that means the rainbow. Another term for rainbow is Konton Kurowi, which is the circular rainbow around the sun. And we have pictures of that in the article. But the piece is Nyankopong, meaning serpent, Pong meaning great, Pono also meaning circular. So we have within the title, when you have the proper etymology, not only something that's idealistic or symbolic, but it cuts across various Afurakani cultures going back to ancient Kemet. When we talk about the creative power, when we said the fire and light coming from the darkness and penetrating the black substance and creating black spheres and enlivening, igniting the black spheres and creating all different things. Ra and Rait are the divine living energy within all created entities. When light moves through, when rain is bent by a light, or it's refracted, when light is refracted, by mist or by water or rain, that's when you get a rainbow. Just like if you send the light through a glass prism, then it's broken up into various, the spectrum, the different color spectrum, and you can see the rainbow coming out. But even if you have a puddle of water and sunlight shines through that, the light is refracted or bent through that puddle of water, and then you see a little rainbow. And of course, when you see rainbows outside, you can see regular arches, but then you can also see rainbows around the sun. Sometimes that's why it's called Konton Kurowi. Rainbows around the moon, Konton Kuro Sorane. So, and those are called moon halos, and then they call them sun halos. But when the fire and light is moving through the atmosphere and is refracted by water or mist, then you get the rainbow. That rainbow is an arch sometimes, and sometimes it's a circle, and that's where you get that circular serpent, who's a circle or an arch, and represents the light coming from the sun, because it's the sunlight that gets bent, that gets refracted, and manifests the rainbow. So the fire and light of Ra and Rait, the creative power that animates all created entities in the universe, when it's broken up into the different spectrums of light, you see all the various colors that make up all the different images. So everything is contained in the white light. And the interaction between the white light and the black substance of space creates all various things. So that's why you have Ka and Ka'at, the black substance of space, being called the grandmother and grandfather of all of the Abosom after they were first created by Amen and Amenet. But then you have Ra and Rait called the Creator and Creatress, the divine living energy operating through all things. So you have that light, the rainbow, directly associated with the sun. The rainbow can be circular. It can also be an arch. It's a serpentine form, whether it's circular or an arch or a wave. And then it's the creator and creatress operates through the rainbow. So they are the collective, represent the collective ancestry, the great ancestor and the great ancestress, the ancestral spirit of Afurakani, Afurakaini people. So that's part of the etymology. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me check one thing here, because there's one part of the article I want to make sure everybody gets, because it's a very extensive article and there are certain things we just wanted to touch on. So as you're reading through the article, you'll have a better understanding of it. And you can download the article now. We put the link up. We do show the pictures of dual rainbows, which you'll see representations of Ra and Rait operating through both. Okay, we also show a picture of a temple in Abomi, Vodun temple in West Africa, Africa. They have pictures of the rainbow serpents. One picture shows both of them, then the other one shows the serpent swallowing its tail. We have that piece. We talk about how in each one of the various cultures, even if you go to ancient America before the whites and their offspring came, when we were here first, the rainbow serpent is the creator and creatress of the universe. So that's the rainbow serpent, operates through the sun, fire, and light, collective ancestry, and so forth. Okay, and let's see, there's one more piece we wanted to get into on that. Okay, I think let's go to the piece on just so you can see Ra-Aku. Okay, so in the article we talk about a title. We already talked about Nanka, which is the great serpent. Okay, so Ra has a title in ancient Kemet. If you look in the book of the Cow of Heaven, sometimes they call it Destruction of Mankind. There's a text dealing with a number of different things. It's the birth of Sekhmet. She's sent to destroy the enemies of Ra. She kills, the vast majority of them. Then there's a portion when Ra is speaking with Tahuti, and then he says, let's go on to the mountain where nobody can see us so we can, talk about certain things, because certain people were plotting against Ra, and they wanted to destroy the enemies, who some of those entities, later on, that's the origin of the whites and their offspring, the enemies of Ra and Rait, and so forth. So going through that text, there's a portion of the text that talks about Ra being called Ra-Aku. Now, Ak and Aku means shining, illuminating one. That's why the ancestresses and ancestors, one of the titles of them in ancient Kemet are the Aku. Ak meaning shining, illuminate one, illuminating one, illuminated one, and then Aku can be plural. But the serpent that's around the sun, the circular serpent around the sun, is also sometimes called Aku or Akut or Akat, Aket, and so forth. So there's a title of Ra where he's called Ra-Aku. Ra, the illuminated one, the illuminate one, and so forth, and then you have the serpent around the sun. Ra, spoken with the rolling R, Ra becomes Da in Vodun. In Haitian Vodun is Da Mbala or Dambala, Dambala Wedo, and then Ida Wedo is the female, and of course they're the rainbow serpents again, the creator and creatress of the world, the collective ancestry of all Afurakani, Afurakaini people. So Da and Ra are the same entity. Ra-Aku becomes Ra-Aku, or Da-Aku, or Nanku, a Nanko, or Nyanko, and that's the Nyanko, and then Pong is great, but also circular. So that's where you get Nyankopon in the tree language, the Akan language. It comes from Ra-Ku, or Da-Ku, or Danko, Nanko, Pon. That's the origin of it. Now, some people not understanding that will try to say, well, no, it really comes from Inyam, and there's no basis for that in the etymology. But when you look next door to the Akan people in Ghana, who make up about 45% of the population of Ghana, so it's about 11 to 12 million AKANFO in Ghana. But next door to Ghana is Ivory Coast, or Cote d'Ivoire, and the Akan people make up about 42% of the people in Cote d'Ivoire and Ivory Coast. It's about 8 or 9 million Akan in Ivory Coast, and then there are about 11 or 12 million Akan in Ghana. Before these borders existed, The Akan people were together, but some migrated further west, and they settled in Ivory Coast. One of the largest Akan groups in Ivory Coast are called the Baule, B-A-U-L-E, sometimes it's B-A-U-O-L-E, different variations. They have different pronunciations, slight variations of the pronunciations that we often hear in the Akan, from the Akan people in Ghana. They still speak the Tree language, a different version of that, a different dialect, but they pronounce things slightly differently. So instead of saying Nyame, they say Nyamie, or Nyamie, very similar. Instead of saying Asase, like Asase Afua, the Earth Mother, they say Asie. Instead of saying Nyankopong, they say Anangaman. So just like we have in Akan, we show Nyanko can be in Nyanka and Nanka. Well, and a Nyankopong, meaning the great serpent. Well, right next door, those millions of Akan next door, instead of saying Nyankopong, they say Anangaman. Sometimes they say Odangaman. Sometimes they say Edangaman. The man comes from the pong. So Edangaman is from a Nyankopong. Edangaman, Odangaman, or Anangaman. So it's Ananga, Odanga, Edanga. That's how we show the rolling R. Ra becomes Da and Na. Interchangeable, the rolling R, the D, and the N are interchangeable. You can see that explanation of that if you look at the term, for example, K-A-R-A. Kara, as we would say it in English, but with the rolling R is Kara. Or something, you could roll the R very forcefully and say Kara, but typically the tongue tapping the roof of the mouth once is Kara. But if you say K-A-R-A, Kara, then you say K-A-D-A, Kara, Kada or Kara, K-A-N-A, Kana. So if you said all three, K-A-R-A, K-A-D-A, K-A-N-A, Kara, Kada, Kana. First it was the R, rolling R, then we said the D, then we said the N. Kara, Kada, Kana. You see that it's very similar because in each pronunciation of these sounds, the tongue is tapping the roof of the mouth once. So that's why they are in linguistics, or what is called linguistics, they're considered interchangeable. So the rolling R, the D, and the N. So that's why you have Edanga, as in Edangaman, Odangaman, Anangaman, and Nyankopong, or Nyankaman and Nyankopong. You also find in the Ebree language of the Ebree Akan people in Ivory Coast, they call the creative power Nyanka or Nyanka. So you have a Nyankopong, that's the way they pronounce it. The AKANFO people in Ghana pronounce it Nyankopong, which is actually from the Nyankopong. We show that etymologically coming directly from ancient Kemet, Ra the great serpent. But next door, those millions of Akan next door, instead of saying Nyankopong, they'll say Nyanka, Edangaman, Anangaman, Odangaman. So that proves conclusively that there's that real connection, that real etymology derives directly from ancient Kemet, from Ra-Ku, Ra the great illuminated one. Ra-Ku becomes Ra-Kun, Da-Kun, Nan-Ku, Nyanko, Nyankopong, Anangaman, Edangaman, and so forth. Now, the same thing exists with Ra, Rait, or Rait, Akut, and Nyankonton. It's critical. We already know that Nanka is the serpent, the male serpent as well as the female serpent, but the Ntong part, being the feminine part, is very critical, so we need to deal with that. Ntong, we said before, is the matrilineal, a title of the matrilineal clan. Akan culture is a matrilineal society, meaning that inheritance is transmitted through the mother's line. the mother's blood circle. So you have a father, and then you have a mother. If your father's from the Asona clan, and your mother's from the Adriana clan, then when you're born, you're not from your father's clan, the Adriana clan, you're from your mother's clan, the Asona clan. Or, well, if your mother's Asona, then you're Asona. Whatever clan your mother is, that's what you are. So if a father is from Adriana and the mother is from Asona, then all the children are from Asona. If the father was a king, an Oheni, and he's Adriana clan, then the only people that can be his successors will be children who are from the Adriana clan. But because he married a woman, you can't marry in the same clan because that's considered incestuous. So you have to marry outside of your clan. It's exogamous. So he married somebody from the Asona clan, which is normal, but all of his children are Asona. So the only way he can have people succeed him, none of his children can succeed him. He has to find a female in his family from the Adriana clan, whose children are, of course, Adriana, and they will take the throne because it's a matrilineal thing. It's the same thing with, so matrilineal meaning the succession and inheritance, whether it's property or whatever, typically comes through the mother's side because it's a what we would call matricircular society. Instead of saying lineal, we're a circular people, holistic people, so we typically say matricircular, or matricircle or blood circle. So because of that, when you look at the term ton, it means arch. It's that circle, it's the half circle, it's the crescent. It represents the womb. When you look at certain, in fact, if you look at these adinkra symbols that make up the necklace that I'm wearing, the crescent here, and we have a picture of this particular symbol right here in the article. The crescent represents the female very often in Akan, iconography, and symbolism. So that crescent very often represents the womb of the female, when the womb is going to be seeded with, what will later become a child, a living being. So when you look at that crescent or that arch, that's dealing with the females, dealing with matricircular society, is dealing with matricircular inheritance, and so forth. So when you're looking at Nyankopon tone, the tone portion is feminine. So it's not just God's arch, the rainbow. It's talking about the feminine Nanka, the feminine serpent, the matricircular serpent, the great matricircular serpent, the great bent serpent, the great arched serpent. Now, you also have, hold on, let me see, I think did somebody have a question on that part? Let's see, hold on one second. Okay, I thought I saw something pop up. So you have that circular, that arched serpent, which in the rainbow is an arched serpent. The rainbow itself is representative of a serpent, and that's a matricircular thing. And then you also have the sun halo. We have pictures of that. Then you have the moon halo, and that's Konton Kurowi, Konton Kuro Sorane, and those are circular serpents. So the combination of those two is what makes up the symbolism of Ra and Rait in the Medutu of ancient Kemet. So that female serpent in Nyankonton, the male serpent in Nyankopong, they unite to create the universe and all created entities. Pong is, in ancient Kemet, we'll show that, Pa and Ta are the definite male article and the definite female article, and then you have Pong and Tone, which is the demonstrative adjective in male and female. In English, the definite article is the. So if you have the governor or governor, then you say the governor or the governor, then the or the is the definite article because it defines the. In ancient Kemet, the definite article is a male version and a female version. It's not just neutral like the in English, you have pa, which is the male definite article, and ta, which is the female definite article. You have pon, which is the male demonstrative adjective, and then ton, the female demonstrative adjective, meaning like this or that. So pa and ta, like if you had pa ntoro meaning divinity or God, a divinity or a God, instead of saying the God, you would say pa ntoro, the ntoro. That's masculine. But if you were saying ntorot, which is feminine, goddess, then you wouldn't say pa ntoro, the goddess, you would have to say ta ntoro, because there's a male and female version of the definite article. There's a male and female version of the. The male version is pa, the female version is ta. There's a reason for that. The pa, the expansion, is male. The ta, or t, is the contraction, and that's female. So the male expands and the female contracts. And the complement of expansion and contraction creates a thing. You can expand and something is growing and expanding, but if there's no brakes put on the expansion, you never have an entity. So you have to have expansion and contraction. The pa, sound-wise, as well as iconography-wise, is the expansion. That's why it's the male definite article, and the ta is the contraction. It completes. It puts the brakes on the expansion, but it also completes the entity. That's the female. Then you have pon, which is the male demonstrative adjective, and then you have ton. So for example, you have, in English, instead of saying this God, if you're describing a particular divinity, you say this God. In English, you put the demonstrative adjective first. You put the this first, and then the subject afterwards. In Ancient Kamit, you put the demonstrative adjective at the end. So instead of saying this God, you would say God this. So if you were saying this God, you would say ntoro, that means deity, male deity. This, pong, ntoro pong, meaning God this, or in English it would be this God or this particular God. The female demonstrative adjective is tong. So you would have ntoro tong, meaning this goddess. If you look at that, and again, pong, expansion, tong, contraction, male and female. So ntoro pong, ntoro tong. If you look at that concept of the male expansive force at the end and the female contractive force at the end, when you're dealing with the female aspect, you can look at Nyankopong, meaning this great Nanka, and Nyankonton, meaning this great female Nanka. The first one is the male Nanka, Nyankopong, and then the second one is the female Nanka, Nanka-ton, or Nyankonton. And that also, of course, deals with the rainbow, but both of them are rainbow serpents. So that just gives some of the etymology to show that we're talking about Ra and Rait. When we're pouring libation, we hold the vessel up to Nyamewaa-Nyame, and very often in our Akan culture, you would say you show Nyamewaa-Nyame the drink, but you do not offer Nyamewaa-Nyame the drink, because of course you can't offer anything to the Supreme Being. But then after that, after you show the drink, show the water, show the drink to Nyamewaa-Nyame, the Supreme Being, then you begin to pour the libation into the Asase Afuya, the Earth Mother, and then you call on the various divinities. What some Akan people often do is hold the drink up and say, like normally you say, Nana Nyame Mecheri Wonsu, Namema Wonsu, Nana Nyamewaa Mecheri Wonsu, Namema Wonsu, which means Nana Nyame, or great grandfather, great great grandfather Nyame, the Supreme Being, male. We show you this drink, this water, but we do not offer it to you. We do not attempt to offer it to you. And Nana Nyamewaa, the great grandmother Nyamewaa, Supreme Being, female divinity, we show you this water, but we do not offer to you. Then we begin to pour to the various forces of nature, the children and grandchildren of Nyamewaa-Nyame, and then the NANASOM and Samanfo, ancestresses and ancestors, the Asamanfo Pa, our good ancestresses and ancestors, and so forth. What you'll often hear misguided AKANFO do is hold the drink up and say, Nyankopon and Nyankopong. They think Nyankopon is the supreme being. Or they'll say Nyankopon, and they think Nyankopong is the supreme being. Or they think Odomaikoma is the supreme being. Or they think Obra is the supreme being. And in reality, only Nyame is the great father, Nyamewaa is the great mother, and Nyankopon is Ra, Odomaikoma is Atem, Obra is Ptah, Nyankopong is Kepra, and we show that we have articles on all, dealing with all of those in some capacity. So that's the piece. We need to understand that who these divinities are, who Ra and Rait are. Now, practically, when you're dealing with Ra and Rait, ritually and spiritually, and just throughout the course of the day, Ra and Rait use the sun, the Oriya, the Aten, as a physical transmitter of their spiritual energy. They are the divine living energy that animates all created entities. They don't operate through non-created entities, they operate through created entities, meaning divinely created, divinely sanctioned entities. The whites and their offspring are spirits of disorder without an okra, without a soul, a divine consciousness. They exist, but they were not created with a capital C. We often use the example of the coca plant is a naturally occurring plant. It's a created entity. But then when somebody comes and takes the coca plant, takes the leaves of the coca plant and different aspects of the plant, takes it through an unnatural process and creates a product called crack cocaine, that's a product that exists, that was made, but it wasn't created by the Supreme Being, nor was it sanctioned to come into being by the Supreme Being. It was not a creation that was inspired by divine order, through divine order, by the Supreme Being, so it's not a created, capital C, divinely created entity. It was just something that was made. The whites and their offspring are very similar. They are not created by the Supreme Being. The Supreme Being never created melanin recessive, albino, extra vitiligo entities. The only people that were created were Afurakanu, Afuraikaitnu. The same thing in your body. Your cells are created. If you engage in processes, behaviors, take in toxins and things like that that causes some of your cells to become cancerous, and they become disfigured first, and then instead of supporting the organs and organ systems, they begin to attack all the various organs and systems, which does happen in the body. About 1 out of every 100,000 cells, as we said before, becomes cancerous. Then that cancerous cell is not a cell or entity that was created as a cancerous cell by the Supreme Being. In fact, it was a liver cell created by the Supreme Being. It came into being according to divine order, in harmony with divine law, with Ma'ah and Ma'at, the male and female forces of divine law and balance. It came into being that way. So maybe it was a liver cell or a cell of the pancreas or whatever. But because of disorder, it becomes disfigured first. It no longer looks like the other cells, and it no longer functions as the other cells, and now it only seeks to consume and destroy the healthy created cells. And the divine response to those kinds of cells is the immune system, which kills them, which eradicates them from the body. And it's the same thing in the universe. We have a divine immune system, which is comprised, and lymphatic system, which is comprised of Heru, Behudet, and Sekhmet, or Benna and Abenna in Akan culture. They operate through the divine immune response in the great divine body of Nyamewaa-Nyame, or Amenet and Amen, and they destroy cancerous entities, disfigured, destructive, disordered entities. The whites and their offspring are just cancerous cells within the body of black humanity, and they seek to consume and destroy all the other cells, the rest of Afurakanu, Afuraikaitnu, until we attune to our divine immunity and eradicate them, which is what we are on and what we need to be on. So all that to say, you have these different creations, entities. Ra and Rait are the creative power that creates all created entities. They're the divine living energy that animates all created entities, naturally created entities. Plant life, animal life, human life, meaning Afurakani, Afuraikaitni, human life, mineral life, and so forth. Your divine living energy. It's not just electricity. You have a conscious, living, spiritual force that moves within you and animates you. It's beyond just electromagnetic energy. Anything can have electromagnetic energy. But the force that you have is a conscious force. It's a portion of the energy of Ra and Rait, these two creative powers. Ra and Rait are called the great Ba and the great Ba'et, or Ba, in creation. Just like we have the Ka and the Ka'et, which is the divine consciousness in creation, the great soul, two entities that actually give birth to your own soul, your own Kra, your own Krawa. And we talked about that in the first session, and we have an article coming out about that. Just like you have a portion of the great Ka and Ka'et that dwells within your head, which is your soul, your consciousness, that is always pulling you as an entity, as an Abosom, as a divinity that dwells within your head. It's always pulling you in the right direction, trying to urge you towards divine order. Sometimes you listen and follow the pull of your Kra, your soul, and sometimes you do not. And when you don't, you fall out of harmony with order, you cause negative consequences for yourself. But sometimes spirituality is about aligning with the Kra. But just like you have the Kra, which is that force dwelling within your head that gives you focus on what your Nkrabia and your Nkra, your divine function in the world is, and is always pulling you towards that, you also have a divine living energy that animates you, that comes directly, which is a small portion of the divine living energy of Ra and Rait. In the text of Kemet, they say Ra is the great Ba that animates all created things. He's the Ba, or the life spirit in the different divinities, in Afurakani, human life, plant life, mineral life, and so forth. Just like you have a Ka, a soul, you also have a Ba, which is a life spirit. You will see the Ba, a conscious, living, energetic spirit or force that you can communicate with. You will see the Ba in ancient Kemet often as a bird, but very often as a human-headed bird, and they show it in different ways. They'll show the bird sitting at the funeral scene, at the scene of the weighing of the heart, at the tomb, and so forth. There are texts talking about asking the Ba not to leave the person or not to depart from the person, and so forth. And you also see next to the Ba the little bird, the human-headed bird, and the human head is the same head as the person. So it's showing that this is, the person's conscious, living, animating spirit. They have a little bowl with smoke coming out right next to the bird, and it's part of the iconography. And that little bowl is a bowl of fire, a bowl of incense. So it's showing the fire energy of the great Ba and the great Ba'et, Ra and Rait, the creator and creatress of the world, that fire, power. But then it's also shown as a bird with wings, meaning it's animating. The wings dealing with animation, movement, also breath. So when they talk about the Ba leaving the body, if you think about taking in a deep breath, you're taking something that's outside of you and it's coming inside of you, and you utilize that which you just pulled inside your system to animate you, because inside the air is oxygen, and inside the oxygen is the life force energy, the firepower that animates you. It's inside the oxygen where you have the life force energy where the Ba resides, and when that Ba gets inside your system, its wings began to flap, it animates you, animation. And then the bowl of incense or fire talks about what kind of animation is fire. It's life force, life fire energy. Just like you can communicate with your Ka or Ka'et, your Kra, as we say in Akan, or Krawa, you can also communicate with your Ba, that aspect of Ra and Rait that dwells within you. There's a particular text called the Discourse of a Man with His Ba. And there's it's a long text from early period in Kemet, around the so-called 12th dynasty, where a man is upset and he's ready. He just hates the way the society has degenerated because there have been invasions and criminals have taken over, and he's dialoguing with his Ba. And they talk, and his Ba basically says, stop acting a fool, stop being depressed, shut up, basically. But when you go through the whole text, the Ba, the life force energy, is a divine, conscious, living energy that dwells within you. So just like you have a brain, which is the physical seat of your Ka, then the blood that surges through your body and moves through your brain as well, that blood carries oxygen, and the oxygen carries the life force energy, and that is the seat of the Ba. So just like your body has life force containing blood that carries the animating energy, and your brain is the control center, spiritually your Ka or Kra is the spirit's brain, and the life force energy in the blood, that's where the Ba is. Now Ba means life, spirit, life, soul, conscious living energy, and so forth. In Akan, you have Ba Ra or Bara, sometimes called Obara or Obra. So just like you have Ka in Kamit, meaning soul, and Kara or Kra, meaning soul in Akan, you have Ba in Kamit and Bara or Bra or Obra, which meaning soul, meaning life or existence in Akan. So it's the life energy. Obra also means the menses. It can also mean the menses in the female, and of course that deals with blood. So that's why we show that the lifeblood, the menses, the lifeblood, is the seat of the Ba. But blood in general, just like the melanin, the Abosom, is where the Ka radiates through. So the apex of the Ka, the seat of the Ka, is in the brain, but you have neuromelanin. Melanin is a black substance. It's all throughout our bodies. It comes from the black substance of space. The apex of it is the neuromelanin in the brain, but the energy radiates throughout all of our Abosom, our melanin, inside of our bodies, inside of our organs, organ systems, nervous system, and of course on the skin, on the surface, but on inside you have melanin in the various organs. That is the dwelling place of the Ka and the Ka'et. But the blood is the dwelling place with the central organ, of course, dealing with the blood is the heart. But the blood is the dwelling place of the Ba. And the Ba is the conscious life soul, of the conscious life spirit, conscious living, divine living energy that animates us. Beyond just allowing us to move, there's a consciousness, so you can communicate with your Ba. And when your Ba and your Ka are in alignment, then you're in harmony with divine order. Just like physically, if your heart and brain are in alignment, of course your body is in order. If your Ba and Ka are in alignment, if you're a divine living energy that animates everything that you do, every movement that you make, is in harmony with the Ka, the divine consciousness, which is leading you in the right direction, then you're in harmony with divine order. If your life force energy is being neglected, your conscious life force energy is being neglected, then that leads to a degeneration of the physical vehicle, but you're also not living in harmony with the direction of the Ka. So we're going to get into more with the Ka and the Ka'et and the Okra and Okrawa, because we have a pretty extensive article coming out about that. We're going to deal with some information as well as dealing with the Ba and Ba'et, but we just wanted to touch on that because Ra and Rait are the creative force that give birth to the miniature Ras and Raits, which are the Ba and the Ba'et, the Ba inside your body, the divine living energy in your body that's conscious. It's a conscious force that you can communicate with. Okay. So any questions on any of that information? Because we just wanted to basically go more in detail about the Nyankopon and Nyankonton articles, so people will have a better understanding about the etymologies, the cosmology that supports the etymology. And let's just say one thing about that whole notion, just in general. The whole notion of looking at the etymological origin of various terms, you have to have a process. The whole notion of linguistics or philology being a science, that's foolishness. That's a pseudoscience. Linguistics is not really a science, it's a pseudoscience. When you look at the true story behind it, and they talk about when they first began to develop this process of linguistics, and historically they look in Hinduism and say about 500 quote unquote BCE is when linguistics first began to emerge as a manner in which people were comparing language. All of that is foolishness. Even the fact that Europeans will point to 2,500 years ago as the starting point or beginning to emerge this quote unquote science of linguistics, and they've added on ever since. In reality, white people comparing words that sound similar and concepts that sound similar, they decided to label them sitting down comparing words a science. Then they called themselves experts in the science. They gave the process or their behavior a title, linguistics, philology, linguistics. Then they gave themselves titles in that process, so they call themselves experts in the process. They come up with a flawed methodology of comparing languages, and then tell you that that's part of the scientific method of linguistics. And if you don't follow their method, then you're not a linguist. Now, some of our people are foolish enough to follow along with that flawed logic. In reality, when the whites and their offspring invaded ancient Kemet and other centers of civilization in Afuraka, what happened was they're learning, observing different things, and they recognize that where they came from in Europe, they came from northern Eurasia, they invaded southern Europe first. Afurakaini people were already, of course, in southern Europe. So before white people invaded the areas that are now called Greece and Rome and different areas, of course, we were already in the southern part of Europe. They were up in northern Eurasia during the last ice age, and they began to spill out of northern Eurasia after the end of the last ice age. So when they came out and came to southern Europe, we were already there. They learned about the divinities that we were worshiping there. They saw we were worshiping divinities. We were communicating with the forces of nature. Then, of course, they would corrupt that, pervert the names of divinities. So instead of having proper names of Abosom, now you have Greek perversions like Zeus and Hercules and different false divinities. So then they, hundreds of years later, come into ancient Kemet, and then they see the various Abosom, various divinities, different cultures, different cultural practices, and then they start realizing, wait a minute, the names of the deities in ancient Egypt, quote unquote, the Egyptian gods, actually, and Ethiopian gods, as they would say, all the Greek gods actually came originally from Ethiopia and Egypt, and they were right about that. So they started learning words, started learning phrases, started learning about cultural practices, started learning a number of different things, and realized that the origins of these practices that were found in southern Europe, of course by the Afurakaini people in southern Europe, actually had come from ancient Afuraka. So they started making those comparisons because they were learning these things from looking at our culture, and basically some of our people gave some of that information. Sometimes we make the mistake of feeding them information. Sometimes they're doing it through observation, and it's hit or miss for them, but when we feed them information, they repeat it, then they've gotten some information. So they started developing a process of looking at words and phrases and things like that, and comparing them and compiling information, and now they call this linguistics. Now, and they continue to just develop a process, a flawed process. Now, if they actually, if we follow that process that's laid out by the whites and their offspring, that's this pseudoscience of linguistics, it's hit or miss. Sometimes you compare some things, sometimes you get things correct, but sometimes you won't. In our culture, we have always had a real process which the whites and their offspring would consider linguistics, but when we communicate with the Abosom and we attune to the forces of nature, all of them have vibrations that emanate from them. Every living entity, every created entity operates, according to vibrational frequencies. So just like you have a trumpet or a trombone or a clarinet or a flute or whatever, they all are made, they have different forms, they have different structures. The same air will move through them, but because their structure is different, the sounds that resonate from them are different. So it's the same thing with us. We have a different nkra and nkrabia, a different function to execute in creation. And our form that we're given by Nyamewaa-Nyame is reflective of that function. Just like every organ in your body has a specific function, an nkra and nkrabia, but the form of the organ is rooted in that function, so it has a specific form that supports the function. We, as Afro-Akani people, we have specific forms. The way our morphology is based on the function we are to execute. So when the divine life force energy of Ra and Rait resonates through our specific forms, just like with the instruments, we are instruments. Based on our unique form, there's a unique configuration of vibrations that emanates from us. As long as we're breathing and moving, the life force energy, the ba'et that's moving through us, it creates a specific configuration of sound vibrations, sound waves, that's unique to our form, that's different slightly from everybody else's. Nobody looks exactly like you and has your exact form or your exact nkrabia, your function. So the configuration of forces coming from one Afro-Akani person is going to be different from someone else's. That's unique configuration of forces. If you hear it with a spiritual ear and you can repeat it, that actually makes up your true name. So just by virtue of the fact that you were born, you have an nkra and nkrabia, you have a form, a morphology that's reflective of that function you were given, then that you have a specific configuration of vibrations that is constantly emanating from you at all times. That's emanating your true name. That configuration of vibrations is your true name. So when we name our children, it's based on that process of attuning to the Okra and the Obra, or the Ka and the Ba, the Kayet and the Bayet of the child, and then giving them a name that resounds that configuration of forces. So we say all that to say that we're constantly emanating sound vibrations. And when we attune to Afro-Akani people, plant life, animal life, mineral life, and Afro-Akani human life, all of the created universe, the Abode, when we attune to them, we get their vibrations, their sounds. And it's tied, the sounds are reflective of their function, of course. So when you look at our cosmologies, the way we weave our cosmologies, they're just reflective of reality as it truly is. So when we attune to any living entity that's created in the universe, even if it's outside of our particular Afro-Akani ethnic group, meaning an Akan person communicating with a Yoruba person, or looking at Igbo culture, or anything, we can attune to their specific configuration of vibrations coming from them, compare with ours, and we can see the comparisons. We attune to the Abosom that govern them because we worship the same Abosom. We just have different names for them because we have a different culture, but the names are very similar. But we're dealing with the same forces in nature: the sun, moon, stars, earth, oceans, rivers, and so forth. So when we see another culture, we can attune to the same force in nature and see who that force in nature is, but then see what they call that force in nature. We can make comparisons because we're vibing on the same energy. We can also see in European cultures who are devoid of any divine spiritual energy, any Ba and Ba'et, we can see the things that they have stolen, the things that are missing, and then we can make connections because we have the wholeness, we have the cosmology. So when you're making etymological connections, all of that comes into play. You can't just have the form and the definition. If you're looking for words that are similar to other words and the roots of words and the etymon and so forth, you have to have three things. It just doesn't stand, as they would say, on two legs, the particular form, morphology, and then the meaning. We talk about form and we talk about function, because function is a more proper designation instead of just saying meaning. Meaning is defined in our culture, in our cosmology, by function. What function did something come into being to execute in creation? So if you have certain words and you're looking for the origins or the cognates of other words, they have to have the same form, but they have to have the same function, meaning definition or meaning. But then you have to understand the cosmological infrastructure that gave birth to the form and the function. If you don't understand the undergirding cosmology, then it's always going to be hit or miss. Sometimes you'll get certain words right, sometimes you get things wrong. We have an article called More Means Dead, and we show the etymological origin of the term more, and showing that it actually means dead. So you see, we show the various definitions of the term more in the European languages, and their pseudo-etymological breakdown of the origin of the term, and then we show all of those definitions. It's about 7 definitions that you'll find in European languages, and they trace them back to a Proto-Indo-European root, and saying this is the origin of the term more. We show that those same 7 definitions you can find for the term myrrh in ancient Kemet. The exact same seven definitions with the exact same meanings, plus more. It's not just that mr or more and myrrh in ancient Kemet sound alike. It's not just because, meaning they have the same form. It's not just because they have the same 7 identical meanings. That's form and function. But then the third piece, which is critical, is the cosmology that is the infrastructure that gives birth to the meaning. So the various 7 meanings plus more, there are more than just 7 meanings that exist in ancient Kemet. Only 7 of them can be found in the European languages, but the 7 definitions you find in Kemet plus more are all united by the cosmology, and all 7 definitions are related to one another. If you don't understand the cosmology, then you'll understand that more and myrrh is united, like more means love, myrrh means love in ancient Kemet. More means sea or body of water, myrrh means sea or body of water in ancient Kemet. Myrrh means desert land or wasteland or dead land in European languages. More means desert land, wasteland, dead land in ancient Kemet. More means a swamp or swampy land in European languages. Myrrh means swamp, swampy land in ancient Kemet. More means to tie or fasten a ship, as in to fasten a ship. Myrrh means to fasten a ship in ancient Kemet. So you'll find the forms, more and myrrh. You'll find the definitions, more and myrrh. But then the cosmology, that's the infrastructure. It gives birth to the terms more, the sound, the sound. What divinities are those two sounds connected to? What are their functions in creation? How are all the various definitions, which are more than 7, of in ancient Kemet, how are they all tied together by the cosmology? People don't understand that piece, and that's why we put that article out. More means dead. In fact, let me give you I'll put it out there, the link to it for you. Because people don't understand the cosmology, at best, what they have is, hold on one second. All right, so at best what they have is hit or miss. They can understand certain forms, they can understand certain definitions, but they don't have the cosmology. They don't understand how the Abosom are associated with these sound vibrations, because they really don't know who Ra and Rait are, how they operate through the Ba and the Bayat of all created entities, how their infusion of energy, as long as we're breathing and animate, are constantly emanating a specific configuration of sound vibrations, how we can attune ourselves to that see which Abosom govern any created entity, any created or divinely created or inspired thought, and then we can make comparisons about what is the true definition, true form, true meaning of these terms and these words. And this is the real etymological root that no European can deal with. All they can do is repeat information they heard from us, make pseudo connections based on what they heard from us. If they repeat what we said without adding anything to it, then some things they will get correct, but they will never understand the foundational meanings because they don't have that consciousness. They don't have a connection. They don't have a ba. They don't have a ka. They're not connected to any abosom. They're not connected to any forces of nature. So the vibrational frequencies of energy that's based on Ra and Rait moving through divinely created forms, they're totally disconnected from that. So they can't attune to that. They can't hear it. So how can they possibly have a science of linguistics dealing with sound and form and definition and function if you can't tune into the abosom who give birth to form and function and sound and definition? They can't do it. And if you have Negroes who believe that they're linguists because they follow a flawed method given by the whites and their offspring, then they will produce mixed results as well. Some things they will naturally, produce that are intelligent, that are accurate. Sometimes they're listening to their Nsamafo, and on one hand they will produce some good information. But then on the other hand, because they're not listening, they will turn right around and produce some information that's astonishingly just ridiculous, preposterous, and they put it forward as, well, this is a scientific method, this is linguistics, and so forth. So we say all that to say all those things are connected to Ra and Rait. As long as we're living and breathing, the Creator and Creatress Nyankopong and Nyankonton are activating and stimulating our Ba, our Ba'et, our Bra, as we say in Akan, the Obara, the life, the existence within us. Okay, so do we have any questions on any of that information? Okay, so what you want to do is, okay, heads up. So what we're going to do is we're going to end it here. Check out the Nyankopon and Nyankonton article. Also check out the Odomankoma Aktumu Kopa article and the Tredriampong Kere Ra article. And because we're going to be going into detail about those creative powers, and that's going to include as well Asase Afua, some more information about them, and Asase Ya. And then we'll continue to talk about the Ba and the Ba'et, because Ra and Rait are the Creator and Creatress, and everything that proceeds from them, all the Abosom come after them. So all these other creative powers, as well as the other Abosom, they're all children of Ra and Rait. So we're going to continuously talk about the functions of the Ba and the Ba'et, the Obra, as we're talking about these creative divinities. But so we just wanted to get into that. Check out the Nyankopon and Nyankonton article again. If you have any questions, you can actually hit us up on our network, afuraka.ning.com. So we have a network. You can join that network. It's similar to Facebook, but it's our own network. People are studying the same kind of information, asking questions, posting information in the forums that we have. Networking with people around the world who are studying the same kind of information. So that helps people a lot. You can ask questions. You can send us an email. We have the Odwirafo site. Let me give you the direct email for that. So you can hit us up at akuwamumind@odwirafo.com if you have any more questions about that. Any upcoming events, check the odwirafo.com website, but also check out, we have a Facebook page, afuraka.afuraikad as well, and we have a Facebook group, AKANFO NANASOM. So you have that. You have the regular Odwirafo website, the afuraka.ning.com site, the network site, and of course you have this site. These videos will be posted on the YouTube site the Odwirafo YouTube site. All the videos we do are posted on that site, as well as most of them are on this Ustream site as well. So if you missed anything, you can always go back. Of course, you can share the information, share the sites with people who are interested, or you may think may be interested in the information. All the various documents we have over 40 articles out and about 11 publications. All those are free publications. You can download those. We have audio as well. We also have another site, Nkwamua.com. We publish a journal called Nkwamua Whole Life Journal. It talks about holistic health. It talks about melanin. It talks about truthstry in an introductory fashion, but it's also it's something that people who have never been introduced to culture at all can begin to study some information on various aspects of culture: health, wellness, truthstory, culture, Afro-Akani values, and different things like that, Adinkra symbolism, things like that, in a way that they can understand up front. Even younger people, children can understand that. People get the journal and purchase it and check it out for let their children read it and study different things. But it's also good for people who have been involved in culture and studied some things, and it gives different insights on things that people have already studied, just to give you more detail. So you can go to that site. There's a electronic version of that journal. We do sell that journal, and there's a hard copy version as well. And we do trainings and things like that for human service professionals and teachers and stuff like that. So the journal site is the Nkwamua site, and that's linked to the Sankofa Juma site. Which talks about the different trainings and that we do, and then we have a video of doing one of the trainings. We use the journal to teach adults, children, young adults, teachers, social workers, therapists, how to utilize this information for the wellness of our people, physical and behavioral. So if you want to support us, you can check that out. And so if you have any questions, just hit us up on the email. And Medase, thank you for coming out and checking us out. Our next session will be on Benada next Tuesday, and we will be dealing with Odumankoma and Nyankopong, but go to the Afuraka site, Ning site, and we're going to post an invite talking about the details on what article to study or articles to study before the presentation. And we'll also post it on Facebook as well. Okay, so Medase, and we will see you next week. That's it.